for those of you that don't know me, we have to do this sort of thing. I'll get these incredibly brief. It's the whole credibility thing that us trainers have to do. So very quickly, those of you not met me before, I'm Matt. I've had a career that spanned over 22 years now in various senior management roles. I've worked in a whole diverse range of industry sectors in my time, everything from financial services through to the legal sector. I worked for an educational charity for 6 years, heading up a team of marketeers. I did a stint in radio sales and advertising for a radio station called Vibe FM. I don't know if any of you remember Vibe FM or not. Normally, if you do, then it gives me an indication of your kind of the generation. I was responsible for doing all of Mercy Nightclub's advertising and promotion back in 2003 when it first opened up, and got to meet the likes of Dean Gaffney, Robbie from EastEnders. Yeah, that's my claim to fame, and Jordan as well. Wow, how times have changed. I traded stocks and shares for 2 years on what's known as an NLP Master Practitioner. So I'm qualified at the very highest level in something known as neuro-linguistic programming. It sounds very impressive. You've either heard of it or you haven't, basically. There's no in between. It's the sort of thing that Darren Brown practices, Paul McKenna, people like that use a lot of NLP up on stage. But I predominantly use it for coaching and counseling. I'm also a fully qualified hypnotherapist as well. And but don't worry, I'm not going to be swinging gold watches before you and doing the whole look into the eyes kind of thing. I could. This is where people go, can't you just hypnotize us to be sort of really great at time management? I'm like, well, actually, it doesn't quite work like that. But instead, I will take you through a load of tools and techniques, which we're going to cram into the next 45 minutes or 40 minutes as we have left now, and see what you make of those. So anyway, that's me in a nutshell. So this is really interesting. I did a lot of research a while back, and I was investigating causes of wasted time. Where does our time go from? And then I found some useful statistics. And as I said, I used to work for a law firm quite a few years ago now. And I worked very closely with the employment team. And I used to see some of the employment tribunals coming through and some of the cases. And I used some of the examples in this, but also ones that I'd found on the internet as well. I just thought it was quite interesting. Causes of wasted time. These are real life, by the way. These are not made up. So a married employee was looking at a dating website and then denied it while it was still up on their computer screen. An employee was caring for her pet bird that she smuggled into work. An employee was laying under boxes to scare people. Yeah, I know, Heather. That's right. You'd never catch me doing something like that. Employees were having a wrestling match, and this is perhaps my favorite. A sleeping employee claimed he was praying. So I'm sure none of you have done anything like that at all. You all look too honest, I think. Honest faces looking back at me. It's really interesting, isn't it? And it's funny where time can actually go. They say, typically speaking, human behavior is to fill time, fill the void. So if you give someone a 6-hour working day, they will still be able to fit all of what they need to do in 6 hours. If you gave someone an 8-hour working day, and typically speaking, somehow we manage to fill it and consume it anyway. And there's a lot of companies now that have their staff. A friend of mine who runs an agency has his staff working on 6-hour working day. And he said, actually, productivity and efficiency has gone up because they're still getting paid for their 8 or 8.5 hours worth of work. So it's an incentive. It motivates people to get more done in less time. So it just goes to show we are capable of saving time. It's just that sometimes we just allow it to get away from ourselves. Anyway, a little bit interesting there. So there's 5 main aspects that we're going to be looking at as part of today. We've got planning and goal setting, managing yourself, and also the big time kind of, I guess, constraint is dealing with other people and other people's expectations, more frankly. And also we're going to be looking at how to analyze your own use of time as well. So if we look at those main aspects, then basically we should be able to get results. I've just noticed it says 5 main aspects where it's actually 4. Amazing. Anyone spot the deliberate mistake there? Anyway, so we're going to be looking at tools and techniques to be able to see how we can look at each one of those particular time management areas and see how we can be more efficient. Anyway, right. So this is kind of routines and discipline. I'll keep this brief, but the whole concept of this really is that it's good to get yourself into some habits to save time. So basically having a routine that you stick with, planning ahead, that kind of thing is a good way of starting to save time. So for example, in the military, they always make sure that you start the day by making your bed, and you shower and you get dressed, and it's all of those kind of processes. And during lockdown, where people were finding it difficult to stay focused and get into a routine anyway, we were teaching this a lot, where we were saying, look, to still get yourself into that routine, get up at the usual time that you would normally get, even if it meant the fact that you're not driving to work now. Get up at your regular time, still make the bed, still sort of get in the shower, get dressed as if you were getting ready for work. And therefore you become more disciplined in that sense as well. And the other thing as well to look at is start with the bigger picture. So start looking at the bigger picture of where you want to be by the end of the day, or even at the end of the week. And then you start breaking that down into smaller goals and objectives to get there. And I'm going to teach you some tools, time management techniques that will help you do that. Okay. Other thing as well is always have your goals in mind. So even if it's a goal that you want to have completed a certain amount of work by lunchtime or by the end of the day, and equally you're going to have your longer term goals as well, make sure you know where you want to be, because a lot of people who find time management difficult is usually because they're very reactive to their environment rather than being proactive and having a plan and knowing where they want to be and how they're going to get there. So it's just looking at goal setting on top of everything. And the other thing to bear in mind when it comes to kind of creating all of these habits as well, see, a lot of people give up. What they do is they say, right, for example, I'm going to start working from a list. And so they start creating a list and they color coordinate it and they do all of this. And then by the middle of the week, they say, oh, this isn't working for me anymore. This time management technique doesn't work because something went wrong, so I can't do it. And people give up too easily. And in actual facts, it typically takes around about 21 days to create a habit. Okay, some people will say it can actually take up to 66 days. So it's a long period of time. So there's no point in just getting even in a couple of weeks in and then going, oh, well, this isn't working for me. You have to kind of persevere with it to create and form a new habit. So bear that in mind, okay? And also there is a big difference between wanting to do something and needing to do something. Most of the time with time management and when we're not focused is because we're just not motivated. You know, you'll always find, they say one of the most productive weeks of the year is the week before our annual leave, bizarrely enough. And in actual facts, the day before our annual leave, we're incredibly efficient. I mean, I don't know how many of you have found that, but isn't it interesting how you tidy your desk, you get all the crumbs out your keyboard, you know, you get all your work put away, everything's neat and organized, you're on top of it all. And why? Because you're motivated to do something. It's something there for you. You don't want to leave all this work outstanding for other people to pick up. You don't want to have to come back to a load of work. You want to be able to go on a holiday knowing and feeling that you're on top of everything. And that means that you can be calm and relaxed. It makes a lot of sense. So people are able to do it. Now, in truth, therefore, we could be able to do that every day of the week if we wanted to. Okay, nothing stops us. It's just sometimes it's lack of motivation and lack of drive as well. So just understanding the difference between the things that you need to do but you might not want to, and the things that you want to do. Things that you want to do might not necessarily be the highest of priority as well. Okay, and declutter. So whether or not it's your desk or your environment, they typically say, a clean desk policy actually works very well. You might like your creature comforts around you. And it's not like I can't see any of your desks, so I have no idea what's in front of you right now. But it's it's quite good protocol just to keep your environment clean and tidy as well. So that's really what I want to sort of like mention in terms of the routines and the discipline and staying on top of things there. Okay. Oh, we've got someone else joining us. All very exciting. Right, here we go then. So let's start looking at time management techniques. So I was going to say a classic phrase, and then someone will go, I've never heard it before. How do you eat an elephant? Come on, someone tell me. How do you eat an elephant?
You don't.
You don't? You don't,
Small
Teresa.
chunk.
This is a good point, particularly if you're vegetarian. Heather, how do you eat an elephant?
I'd cut it up into small portions.
You'd cut it up into small portions. You absolutely would, wouldn't you? Quite right. One bite at a time. So why is it, therefore, that sometimes when it comes to the bigger tasks that we're putting off, we don't just think to ourselves, well, if I've got a certain amount of time to do them in, why don't I sort of like slice and dice them? I don't have to get everything done all at once. I can just literally just take chunks of it. And if I work out a plan so that maybe I do an hour a day leading up to a certain point, then I can get that particular task done. Now, the principle behind this is particularly useful for people who procrastinate and put things off. Often we're procrastinating. Sometimes it's because the task just seems very big. And I've known people, I'm being just as guilty myself, where I've got a massive task to do. And I'm thinking, oh, I want to get it all done in one go, get it out of the way. But it's going to take me probably the best part of a day. So you get to 9 o'clock in the morning, come in already prepared, get my coffee on the go, and then the phone rings. I pick the phone up, take a message. Oh, can you just? Yeah, okay, fine. So the next minute I'm emailing someone doing that. Before I know it, it's 10:30, 11:15, and I think, right, okay, what I'll do is I'll have a coffee break and I'll crack on with it straight after. And then what you do is now 11 o'clock, and I'm thinking, right, well, hang on a minute. If I start this now, then I'm going to be sort of like going straight into my lunch break at like 12:30. I know what I'll do. I'll have my lunch, and then I'll come back in the afternoon, and then I'll start it. So you come back in after lunch, and then you're feeling a little bit sleepy, and you're in a food coma. You're thinking, oh, I don't really feel like doing it right now. And then before you know it, it's mid-afternoon, and you think, well, there's no point in starting the task now, is there? Because basically, I'll be going at 5 o'clock. So I know what I'll do. I'll start tomorrow, 9 o'clock. How many of you done that? Yeah, keep putting it off. So instead, just thinking, right, okay, let's just slice this up a little bit. So I'm going to commit myself maybe to just spending 1 hour today, and I'll see how far I get with that task. And then 1 hour tomorrow and 1 hour the next day. And I just gradually chip away at that until it's done. Now, obviously, it's time dependent, and it depends on how soon the task needs to be done. But it's pretty useful for those that, you've got a time frame to be able to work in and get things done. So slice things up, look at how to manage that time better. There's loads of sayings like this, by the way. How do you move a mountain? Anyone? You know the answer. How would you move a mountain, Dave?
A shovelful at a time.
There you go. This is probably true, isn't it? Absolutely right. You will move a mountain literally 1 stone at a time. There you go. Right. Now, there is a particularly good book that was written by a guy called Brian Tracy, and it's called Eat That Frog. Has anyone read it?
Yeah.
Notice the joke there. Has anyone read it? Anyway,
Yes, I have.
Sorry, sorry, that just came to me, and I wish it hadn't. But anyway, there's a great phrase from Mark Twain. He says, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. So your biggest frog, if you like, becomes that particular task that either you've been putting off and you just don't want to deal with it anyway. Get it out of the way, get it done. And then basically anything else you have to do that day is going to be better. So that's the sort of psychology behind it. But in fact, Brian Tracy has written a really good book, and I would urge you, there was for a while, and it might still be available, a PDF version of this that you can basically just download for free online. Okay, it's called Eat That Frog, 21 Great Ways to Stop Procrastinating. And a lot of the sort of time management techniques we talk about and many more are actually in this book. So I would actually recommend all of you to get a copy. I mean, if you can't find it now online, Amazon sell it for, you know, cheap as chips. So I strongly advise you to do that. But yeah, it's just basically looking at things at times and thinking, rather than putting it off, tackle it, get it out of the way first instead. And that's the sort of psychology behind that. Now, just by a show of hands, who uses to-do lists? Yeah. Look at Dave doesn't. Dave's far more hardcore, aren't you?
Sorry, it's got very loud. I missed
That's all right.
that bit. Are you talking about lists?
Lists. You use lists?
I use lists.
Oh, you do? There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, got you. That's all right.
I do electronic lists on Outlook.
Cool. Excellent. That's very impressive. So lists. Now, it's actually been said that basically by just using a simple list alone, it on average can actually increase productivity and output by up to 25%. So at least you're doing that. That's a really good start. But sometimes it's the way in which we use lists. So there are different ways of coordinating it. What people often do is they just write a big list and they just tick things off and work from it. And I've seen people drawing arrows and, you know, kind of moving things around, and it all becomes this big mess. So Lakein's ABC model, and Alan Lakein kind of coined this many years ago now. He said, don't just use a linear list, but actually set your list out into 3 distinct columns. So they're going to be tasks that you must do, high urgency, high importance. There's tasks that you should do, okay, which have less of an urgency, but they're important. And then there are things that you would like to do. And the things you would like to do are the sort of least urgent, least important tasks. He said, the best thing you can do is then grid them off. So have 3 columns. And then basically in those columns, in the first column, you've got the must do tasks, but they are written in order of priority. So therefore, whatever becomes at the top of that list is the first task that you're going to be tackling at any one point, and then you work down. Now, obviously, workflow is going to be coming in, so that list is going to be organic, it's going to be changing, and you're going to be modifying it as well. But there's more structure to it than just writing a great big long linear list. And we've noticed people, we teach this on our management courses, and in fact, a lot of people, you know, love it, they embrace it. And of course, you can do your own variations of these things. I mean, I'm just kind of giving you a flavor of how you can use these techniques. But what I find is a lot of people will use kind of a hybrid version of these different tools, and they build their own time management techniques as a result of them. So you've got A, B, and C. I mean, clearly what you end up putting into these columns is going to be pertinent to your own workflow and what you use as well. This is kind of basically an example of something I might use in terms of my own personal lists here. But it's just nice and simple. And what Alan Lakein said is what is important that you can strike through or tick off as a sign of achievement when you've completed a task. So one way or another, either have a box in there that you can tick or be able to strike through, that kind of thing. That is very important, okay? Because it brings that element of satisfaction. Okay, so that's Alan Lakein's ABC method. Now, Stephen Covey came up with Covey's time matrix, and it's taking Alan Lakein's ABC model a little bit of a step further. So Covey came up with a grid rather than columns. And he basically said that we use a scale of how important the actual task is and how urgent the task is. So now we've got a little bit of a benchmark. We've got a criteria that we're now working towards. So any task that is basically of high importance would go into box number 1, and it's high urgency as well. So basically, the importance scale is based upon the fact that if I get that task done, it would have the most impact to either my department or my business. And the urgency is basically down to how urgent it is. So it's time bound in that sense. What he then said was that anything that ends up in box number 2 is clearly of low urgency. In other words, I have time to be able to plan when I'm going to do it, but it's still of high importance. So in terms of actually getting the task done. It's going to be a quality task that needs to be done in quality time. Anything that goes in box number 3, low importance, low urgency. Sorry, it's of low importance and high urgency. You've got to determine then whether or not you're going to delegate. So not everyone has the opportunity to be able to delegate tasks to other people, but essentially what Covey said was, what they are is they're low quality tasks that need to be done. We just got to get it out of the way and done. But in terms of who does it, we don't necessarily need you to do it or a skilled person to do it. It could be like, just someone, please get this task done because it's kind of urgent. For example, if our coffee machine runs out of coffee, okay, you could basically say that that is a high urgent task. It needs to be filled because we're going to have delegates that are going to be moaning and complaining. But in terms of the grand scheme of things, out of all the other significant tasks that need to be completed, it's not exactly the most important. Well, some of our delegates might argue that fact, quite frankly, if they're waiting for their coffee. But who actually fills the coffee machine is really kind of irrelevant. Whether or not it was Ryan or me or Susie Jarrold, someone will grab the key and just fill the coffee machine because it needs to be done. Okay, it's not skills dependent. So we've got urgent and important, important, not urgent, urgent, not important, and then the final box that's left, and some people don't even bother with it, quite frankly, because they're like, well, what's the point of me writing something in there that is essentially not important and not urgent? Because some people will say, well, actually, it will never, ever kind of climb any further than staying in that box. But the rule of thumb is that we get the tasks done first and foremost in box number 1. We get those out of the way, we move into box 2. We've got box 3 where we're getting other people to either help us with it, or we're slotting those tasks in when we've got some spare moment in time. And then basically we've got the not important, not urgent tasks. They're often the things that, such as surfing the internet, doing a little bit of Amazon shopping, stuff like that. However, a lot of experts will say, and when we look at the Pomodoro technique shortly, they will say that actually it's very important that it's not all work, 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 and that you do give yourself certain breaks all the way through the day where you are doing something that you want to do or need to do. And it could be personal things. And that's okay, because it basically can reset the brain when you are then focusing on tasks that need to be completed. So the rule of thumb is, do it now, get it done if that particular task ends up in box number 1. Decide when to do it and plan when you're going to do it if it's in box number 2. Delegate it if you can, or at least slot it in, or look to get someone else to help you with that if it's in box number 3. And essentially, you can almost like get away with dumping it all together if it ends up in box number 4. There are digital versions of this. I've seen people using this in an Excel spreadsheet and basically organizing and prioritizing. It's a good way of prioritizing. That's what it's designed to do. I have seen this used incredibly effectively on shop floors where people have it on a whiteboard in the office and they draw it out. And it's particularly useful if you've got, say, a team of people that are all sharing tasks. So what you can do is you can come in and you can see very visually straight away who's doing which task. I mean, hospitals do it all the time when they've got all their kind of patients and in and out on the whiteboards, and you'll see that doctors put their initials next to the patient that they're seeing. And it's a good visual way of very quickly knowing who's dealing with what. And then when a task is completed, you strike it through. So you can use it on a whiteboard, very visual, on the office wall, and you can put joint team tasks that need to be completed, or you can just use it for yourself as well. Have it printed out, have it as a digital copy. There's lots of different ways and methods of doing it. Now, it also therefore links to how you might manage emails. And I've seen the people take this concept, and if you particularly use Outlook, you know that you've got categories. If you right click on an email, you get a box come up and it's got categories. I don't know if you've all seen that or not. Some of you may use it already, and you can color code them. And I've seen people use this particular Covey's time matrix, but what they do is they set up essentially 4 categories. One which is do it now, one which is decide to do it, and then delegate and then dump. And what they will then do is emails are coming in, is they will change the category of that email to whichever one of these it needs to be assigned to. So then you do a quick filter of all the emails that are basically urgent and important. And then basically, you know that you've got to deal with those. The ones that sit under the category of decide when to do it, well, obviously we can plan and decide when we're going to get back to those people as well, and so on. So I've seen people actually use it for email management, and that seems to work incredibly effectively. So just giving you sort of flavors, ideas, ways that you can use things, okay? So there is kind of a slide on here. What we'll do is we'll send the slide deck out to you as well, so that you've got a copy of the slides for your reference. This is kind of top level, but it gives you an idea of what you might end up seeing in each one of these boxes as well, okay? And you've just got to basically decide how you would structure the importance and the relevance of your own tasks in there, okay? It's also known as the Eisenhower Grid. It's funny how people rip one another off, isn't it, with their ideas. The 34th president of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, somehow got hold of this and went, oh yeah, I've just created this myself. So it might be known as the Eisenhower Grid. It's the same thing. It really is. All right. Known as the 4 Ds. But essentially, you're starting off from box number 1 and you're working your way through. If you like your apps and you're a bit of an app fan, there are actually apps that are designed around Covey's time matrix. So this one is an Apple app that you can download, and it's actually really quite good. You can exactly see on here how it's been laid out exactly in that grid format. It can sync with your own calendar as well. So as you enter tasks in here, it will also populate your diary as well, and you can cross-reference between the two. Android have their own version of it as well. But you can use pen and paper ultimately, can't you? But if you do like your apps and you do want to find a better way of organizing all of your tasks and categorizing them, then that can work really well. There's a desktop version of that as well as the app, so you can use it on the desktop. Okay, I have actually built in a slide for you which has the best time management apps for. Apparently this is not my list, but this is the best apps for 2021. Each one of those is a link to the actual website of where you can read up more information about that particular app. They do different things. Some of them are very specific in terms of what they do. Some of them more kind of visual project management type of apps on there. Some of them are purely designed to keep you more focused. Other ones there are basically there for tracking and monitoring where your time is going. So you've got a whole kind of plethora of different apps that you can use there as well. My advice to you would be, I'm not going to go through them all with you now. My advice to you would be, when you get the slide deck, go through these and find ones that you think, oh, that could actually work for me. That could be quite interesting for me as well. And try them out. A lot of them are free, and if there is a subscription, they're not usually that expensive anyway either. And of course, you've got free trial periods as well. Okay, so that's not going to be on there. Consider when you're delegating as well, because we just talked about delegating a minute ago. It's just a quick word of advice. There's a big difference between delegating responsibility and accountability and just delegating responsibility. And a lot of people, when they're delegating, get this bit wrong. So I just want to kind of draw attention to the fact that when you are delegating a task for someone to do, you are delegating the responsibility of that task to that person. But always remember, the accountability stays with you, the person that's delegating. Because if you were to delegate responsibility and accountability, it's basically abdication. You're just going, over to you, mate. And if you get it all wrong, it's going to be on your head. That is not true delegation. True delegation, you delegate the responsibility, but that person knows that you will remain accountable for the success or the failure of that task. In other words, you should be there making sure that that person has the resources, has the right environment, has the knowledge to be able to do that task. because otherwise you may as well just go, oh, can you just do that? But by the way, if you get it all wrong, then you're going to get a bollocking for it. So it doesn't work. Abdication will never work. It will never motivate anyone either. Just want to draw that attention because a lot of people don't know the difference between responsibility and accountability. Another one of my favorites time management techniques is the Pomodoro technique. Has anyone come across this at all? The Pomodoro technique. Yeah, Dave, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I've not tried it, but I've heard about it. Don't you just set like 15-minute or 20 half an hour intervals?
Yeah, it's
work to the buzzer.
Yeah, absolutely. So Francesco Carrillo in the 1980s basically got hold of a tomato-shaped timer and started to track units of time. And he coined or came up with what he called the Pomodoro technique. So the Italian for tomato is Pomodoro, in case you didn't know. And therefore, that's why he called it that, based on his tomato timer. Now, the thing is with the units of time, you can make them whatever you want them to be. So Francesco came up with basically 25-minute segments. So his Pomodoro technique is based around the fact that you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And then what you do is you essentially then do 4 of those sessions, those intervals. Once you have done 4 Pomodoros, as he called them, okay, which is essentially adds up to 100 minutes of work time, 15 minutes of break, you then take a 15 to 20-minute break, and then you start the cycle all over again, okay? Now, there are Pomodoro timers out there, and there's a Pomodoro app you can get now as well. But a simple timer will do. But the concept behind this is the fact that the average human being can only really remain focused for up to an hour at a time, some less. And after that hour, we pretty much usually get distracted anyway, and our focus wanes. So if you think you're a martyr and you're going, oh, look at me, I've worked through all morning and I haven't stopped, and it's now, oh, it's 11 o'clock. My goodness, where did the time go? Chances are, for every hour you worked past that first hour, you were working less efficiently anyway. You were probably more prone to getting distracted, looking out the window, an email pops up, you lose your focus on what you were doing. I'll just do that. It's just human nature. So this technique is based on the fact that you should give yourself regular breaks all the way through the day. What can work very well is when people basically work for, say, 50 minutes and they give themselves a 10-minute break. And you take your lunch break as you normally would do, but you basically divide the rest of the day up 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break. And in that 10 minutes, you've got to be doing something that's completely unrelated to what you were doing before. And that's a good opportunity really for people to go and make a coffee, have a cup of tea, go and talk to someone, go on Amazon, whatever you do and are allowed to do. It should be something whereby you're doing something different, because the idea, the concept being, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. If any of you have ever done a jigsaw and you're staring at it for ages, and in the end you're just like, I can't find the pieces, and you go and make yourself a sandwich and a cup of tea, you come back like half an hour, 45 minutes later, and you suddenly start piecing all these bits in again, and you're like, oh, I can see them now. And that's because you've relaxed, or you've rested the part of the brain that was doing all of that work. So give yourself regular breaks throughout the day, and you will find that you can actually be more efficient in the time that you're working. I've taught this to students who are revising for exams, and one particular client that I had a few years ago who was homeschooling and really struggling to stay focused. I taught him, basically said, revise for 45 minutes and then take a 15-minute break, and just basically divide your day up like this. And he enjoyed playing the guitar, or he's learning to play the guitar. And he decided to use his 15 minutes to basically practice the guitar. And then he went back to revising for another 45 minutes. And he found that his revision and his information retention went up considerably as a result of being able to do it. In fact, he was motivated to revise because the reward for revising for 45 minutes was getting to practice the guitar. And so a lot of kind of psychology is built into that. So the Pomodoro technique can basically be divided up however you want to do it with your own time frames, but give yourself regular, structured working breaks throughout the day, and you can find that that will really help. Okay. There is also what's known as the Alpen method, just another time management technique. And that is just basically saying, look, grab a bit of paper or do this on screen, define all the activities that need to be completed. So this is going back to kind of your lists again. But this time, what you're doing is estimating the length of time that each task may take. You also plan buffer time in there because we don't want to kind of end up running over and then it's screwing up the rest of our plan as well. And then what you do is you establish prioritization. So from doing that, we then say, right, which tasks am I going to prioritize? I could use the kind of urgent, important matrix, and I can also base this around how long it's going to take to do each one of these tasks as well. And the important part of this is noting the level of success. So I might do this for a week and I say, well, what do I need to adjust and tweak at the end of the week to kind of make this more efficient and work for me better? So there's just a couple of extra things in there that we haven't covered so far, which is the estimation of the length of time and planning buffer time. Now, one of the other things, therefore, to consider around this is monitoring your use of time. And I usually suggest there's some really good apps to do this. I use something on my phone called Office Time, which is free to use. But there's loads of the apps. And what you basically do is you pre-populate it with tasks. Now you can divide them however you want to. I mean, I have got things in there such as when I'm writing new course content, when I get interrupted by other people's demands. So I have that as a category. I have other categories in there, which is based upon when I'm having to do marking. I've got all these different categories. And what I basically do, a bit like a lawyer, when they're billing you for units of time, they set a timer going, don't they? I mean, this is how they make their money. And so for every case. So all you do is you set it all up. You can add things as well as they come up because you can't preempt everything. And you set a timer going on it. And then once you finish that task, you stop the timer and you just basically keep a track of it on your phone. And my advice is that you do it for 20 working days, basically a month. And the good thing about using the apps is that you can run a report and it's all automated. So at the end of the month, you press your report button. I mean, you can do it at the end of the week and just have a look and see where your time's going. Run a report and see exactly how much time you're spending on these different activities. And it gets you to fine tune how you're proportioning your time. It's particularly useful when you're tracking interruptions. Some people call it boss imposed time. It's when your boss is asking you to do, could you just do this? Could you just do that? With the idea that you have a category set up. So if I could ask you all now and say, well, how long do you think you spend on, interruptions and interrupted time and so on? You could take a guess, but I'll tell you, it will surprise you when you add it all up after a month, how much time goes into these different tasks. And you straight away, you can look at where the most time is going and start then coming up with ideas of how you can cut that back. Another thing to consider then, if you've been tracking interruptions, i.e. things that you've been working on that were not initially on your plan, that means that if you divide that figure, however many hours that is, if you divide that figure by the number of working days you've been tracking it, so over a month, it will give you an average figure per day. And that average figure per day is really what you want to allow yourself for interruptions. So say, for example, it works out roughly about an hour and a half. And I don't know why we're looking at Ryan's crotch right now. Were you just distracting everyone? Was it just, I don't know what was going on there. If you say, for example, it works out about an hour and a half per day on average that you end up doing things that were not on your initial plan, then you can actually plan what's known as contingency time. You can allow that and plan for that in your schedule so that moving forwards, it's a bit like you would plan for a meeting. If then someone interrupts you or says, oh, can you just do this? Or you find yourself having to work on something else, you've allowed for that time in there. So it shouldn't now become so much of a problem for you because you've allowed the additional time to be in there. but you'll only know what your typical personal average figure is going to be if you track your time over a period of time and then divide it by the number of working days and come up with an average. But that way I would schedule it. I would plan for that to be in there. Okay. Another method for you, the Seinfeld method. I don't know if anyone remembers Jerry Seinfeld and the Seinfeld sitcom. It was very popular, but basically he came up with the concept, don't break the chain. It's a little bit, but it's kind of based on the idea when someone is, for example, going, say, for example, those of you that do dry January. So the idea is that you're going to go all the month of January without drinking any alcohol. And a lot of people will track it. And the whole reason is because we don't want to see gaps in the days that we've gone, oh, you know, I've done 5 days now, I've done 6 days now. It keeps you motivated. So Seinfeld basically said what you should do is if you've got a particular deadline date that something needs to be completed on, that you chomp away at it, you chip away at it, and you make sure that every single working day leading up to that particular deadline, you do something that contributes towards the task. And it's called don't break the chain. So you can mark it off almost on a calendar. And you say, right, today, it might be today I spent an hour on something or on a particular part of the task. The next day, it could be that I only spent 15 minutes on it. But the whole idea is I must make sure I contribute and do something every single day to contribute to the success of getting that task completed by the deadline date. Okay, it just works based on human psychology again. It's just a way of motivating you moving forwards. Okay, don't break the chain. Another tool I particularly like, and a lot of people really do like this one, Andreessen's anti-to-do list. So Mark Andreessen said what he does is he makes a list of all the tasks that he has worked on which were not on his original to-do list. So it's almost tracking the things that you have completed. And what it does, it avoids that whole issue whereby people get to the end of the week and they go, oh, no, I've been so busy, but I've only completed half of the tasks on the list, but I've been so busy, I just don't know where the time's gone. And people can feel a bit deflated because they're like, well, I know I've been busy and I've been working on loads of stuff, but I don't know what I've got to show for it. So Andreessen said, keep a log of it, have a separate list. And if something comes in that wasn't on your original to-do list, then rather than add it to the to-do list and strike it off, keep it as a separate list. And at the end of the week, you can, you know, with pride, hold it up and go, look what I did. This is my completed list of all the things. So yeah, you might have only completed 10% of the original list of your tasks, but look at what you have actually got through this week. So it's a different way of working. I particularly like it myself. I think it can work really well. It's a very good way to keep you motivated at the end of the week and make sure you don't start your weekend going, God, I don't know what I've done this week. All right. Okay. So it's got to be things that are worthwhile and they're not on your original to-do list. All right. So that's basically Andreessen's to-do list. Right, okay, well, that not move across. So bottom line then, we've talked about time log software as well. Just at the end of the day, just concentrate on slicing and dicing, making sure that you break things down into smaller pieces because it's more motivational. You can chomp away or chip away at these things a little bit easier. Churchill, well, his concept was basically lock yourself in the war room and don't come out until everything's done. It's up to you if you want to work that way or not. I think personally, you know, a lot of people, if you do that, that takes a lot of discipline to do it. But basically, he said, have a plan and stick to it. So that's the Churchill method. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and get it done. So don't procrastinate. If you do, another thing you can do, create a procrastinations list. So the idea being is you take all the things that you've been procrastinating on, you put them on a separate list, you prioritize them, and you basically commit to doing something off that list every day. Or take the top 2 things and then get it done. Have yourself your own procrastinations list that you work from, commit to it. Make sure that you reward yourself, whether or not you basically say, right, I mean, my colleague Elliot, when he's marking, once he's done a certain, so he will assign himself to do so many mark sheets, and once he's done those marks, he will reward himself by playing 10 minutes of Candy Crush on his phone. So I often see him in the corner and he's sitting there like on his phone, like this. But you know what he's doing? It's a bit like the Pomodoro technique. It's just like, no, I deserve it. I've worked really hard for the last hour. I'm now going to reward myself. Some people might go out and have a smoke. Some people might say, I'm going to reward myself by having a cup of coffee and a chocolate bar. The point is, make sure that you know that you're going to reward yourself, and therefore you're more motivated to then work towards the end of the hour when you can get that reward. And don't be frightened to ask for help. All right, at times you don't have to take on everything yourself. It is all right to ask for help. Whew. That was like a quick 45 minutes, wasn't it? But nonetheless, we made it through. So there's only so much I can cover in 45 minutes. But hopefully what you've seen there is a set of techniques and different tools and concepts that you can start thinking, yeah, I might just do that. And to be fair, you don't have to run with all of them all at the same time. Just take one of them. Once the slide deck gets sent to you, go back through the slides, pick a time management technique you think actually could work for you. You might have to adapt it, modify it slightly, work with it, but give it time. Don't give up on it just because it doesn't work for the first week. Remember, it does take time to create a new habit and to get things actually, working for you. All right. Any questions before we wrap up?
Not so much a sort of question as an enhancement, really. One of the things that I do when sort of doing lists and trying to sort of plan your week ahead is to sort of set yourself a budget of time for the tasks as well, because that can help you decide whether you've actually got time to do it before certain deadlines and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. And I think, in the Alpen method that we looked at, that is one of the key components of Alpen, is to say, just think about how much time and set aside time for that task as well. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, definitely. Anyone else got any top tips that they want to share, or anyone else got any questions? No? Wow. Teresa, you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, that was really helpful, Matt. Thanks very much.
Good. I'm
Lots of
glad you found it useful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, everyone. Well, thanks ever so much for your time. And I hope, if I don't see any of you before, then I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas.